The notification from Princeton University felt like a crushing weight in my inbox, not the triumph it should have been. Full academic scholarship with honors, the culmination of 4 years of perfect grades and countless all-nighters. My hands trembled as I stared at my laptop screen, tears of frustration, not joy, blurring my vision. I should have been celebrating, but all I could remember was my parents' voices 6 months earlier. "We gave your college fund to Olivia. She needs it. More than you do, Tyler. You've always been the resourceful one." Little did they know just how resourceful I would become, or that 12 years later, they would be signing mortgage papers where I was listed as their lender. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches, you make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon light slanted through my bedroom window as I read through the acceptance letter again. Princeton University. My dream school since freshman year. The scholarship would cover tuition, but there were still housing costs, textbooks, meal plans, and living expenses to consider. Expenses that should have been covered by the college fund my grandparents had started the day I was born. The fund that now existed only in my memory. I closed my laptop and moved to the window of my small bedroom, staring out at our suburban neighborhood with its neat lawns and 2-car garages. The trappings of middle-class stability that masked what often happened behind closed doors. The inequities, the favoritism, the quiet betrayals that shaped families like mine. From downstairs, I could hear my parents' voices, the familiar cadence of my mother Diane's concerned tone mingling with my father Richard's defensive responses. They were discussing my sister Olivia again. At 26, my sister had moved back home 6 months ago after her third failed business venture. This time, an exclusive online fashion boutique that had hemorrhaged money for 14 months before, collapsing under a mountain of debt. "She just needs more runway," my mother insisted. This next idea could be the one that takes off. I closed my window, not wanting to hear more of the same conversation that had played out repeatedly in our household. The capable son, the struggling daughter, the uneven distribution of concern, resources, and expectations that had defined our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Ethan. "Dude, heard anything from Princeton yet? Deadline for decisions was today." I stared at his message, unsure how to respond. Ethan had been accepted to Cornell months ago, his parents having diligently saved for his education. His future was secure. Mine hung in a precarious balance. "Got in, full academic scholarship," I texted back. I hesitated, then added, "Talk tomorrow." Setting my phone down, I gazed at the framed photo on my desk. Me at 15, proudly holding the state mathematics championship trophy. My parents stood beside me, their hands on my shoulders, faces beaming with pride. "Our little genius?" They'd called me that day. The memory felt distant now, belonging to a different family. One where achievements were celebrated rather than leveraged to justify neglect. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Tyler, can we talk?" My mother's voice came through the door, tentative as if approaching a stranger rather than her son. I took a deep breath, composing my expression before calling out, "Come in." My mother entered, my father lingering awkwardly in the doorway. They looked tired, a permanent state these days. The stress of supporting Olivia's ventures while maintaining their own careers had etched new lines into their faces. "We saw the email from Princeton," my mother began, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "Congratulations, honey. We're so proud of you." I nodded, waiting. There was more. There was always more. My father cleared his throat. We've been looking at our finances, trying to figure out how we can help with the expenses the scholarship doesn't cover. Don't worry about it, I said. Automatically, the response honed by years of being the child who didn't need help, who could manage on his own. I'll take out loans. Tyler. My mother reached for my hand. When we used your college fund for Olivia's boutique, we truly believed she would be able to pay it back before you needed it. The familiar justification made something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't just that they had prioritized Olivia, it was that they had done it, believing there would be no consequences, that somehow their broken promises would be rendered meaningless by Olivia's inevitable success. We know it's not fair, my father added, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, but you've always been the smart one, the capable one. Princeton is giving you a scholarship. They recognize your worth. The capable one. It wasn't a compliment. It was the reason they felt justified in taking what was mine. Olivia has a meeting with a potential investor next week, my mother said, hope brightening her tired eyes. This new idea has real potential. If it takes off, we could have your money back before the fall semester. I looked at them, these people who had raised me, who had once protected me, who now saw me as the child who needed less protection because I could fend for myself, who had taught me, unintentionally, that success was its own punishment. That's great, I said, my voice hollow. I hope it works out for her. It will, my father said with the same certainty he'd had about all of Olivia's ventures. And then we'll make this right. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. They took my silence for acceptance, perhaps even forgiveness. My mother squeezed my hand before standing. Get some rest, sweetie. We'll figure this out. After they left, I sat in the quiet of my room, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioning. The acceptance letter still displayed on my laptop, a testament to years of hard work and a reminder that hard work wasn't always enough when the playing field wasn't level. I opened a new browser tab and typed, "How to apply for student loans without parent information." As the search results populated, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I depended on my parents for anything, the last time their choices determined my future, the last time I accepted that Olivia's needs would always come before mine. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of a transformation. From the dutiful son who accepted his role in the family hierarchy, to someone who would forge his own path regardless of the obstacles placed in his way. Someone who, years later, would have to decide whether to answer when those same parents called, desperately needing the help of the child they had once sacrificed. Someone who would learn that strength wasn't about enduring unfairness. It was about refusing to accept it. 3 weeks after receiving my acceptance letter, I sat at our kitchen table surrounded by student loan applications. The house was quiet. My parents were at one of Olivia's investor meetings. For moral support, my mother had explained. I didn't ask to go. I knew my place. My laptop pinged with an email notification. Princeton University Housing Department. Dear Tyler, we're pleased to confirm your housing assignment for the fall semester with your requested roommate, Ethan Kaplan. To secure your placement, please submit the $2,200 housing deposit by May 15th. I stared at the screen. May 15th was 10 days away. the student loans I was applying for wouldn't be processed that quickly. I had exactly $978 in my savings account, money from my part-time job at the local tech repair shop where I worked. Weekends. My phone rang. Ethan. "Did you get the housing email?" he asked, excitement bubbling in his voice. "We got paired together. I'm already planning our setup, thinking dual monitors, maybe one of those mini fridges." "Ethan," I interrupted, "I might not be able to go." Silence then. "What are you talking about? You got the scholarship, right?" "The scholarship covers tuition, but not all of it. And there's still housing, books, meal plan." My voice trailed off. "But your college fund is gone," I said quietly. My parents gave it to Olivia for her business venture, the one that failed, like all the others. "Are you serious? That was your money. How could they do that?" The outrage in his voice mirrored what I couldn't allow myself to feel. "They said she needed it more than me." "That's—" Ethan stopped himself. "I'm coming over." 20 minutes later, we sat on the front porch swing, the same one where we'd spent countless afternoons since middle school, planning video games, discussing coding projects, dreaming of futures in tech. I explained everything, how my parents had emptied the account, their promises that Olivia would pay it back, the constant refrain that I was the capable one who could figure things out. "So basically, they punished you for being responsible," Ethan said, shaking his head. "That's so messed up." "They don't see it that way. They think they're being fair by giving Olivia extra support because she struggles more." "That's not fair," Ethan said bluntly. "That's enabling, and it's stealing from you." I'd never let myself think of it as stealing before. In our family, resources went to whoever needed them most. And somehow, Olivia always needed them most. "Have you told them about the housing deposit?" Ethan asked. I shook my head. "They're at Olivia's investor meeting." Ethan squeezed my shoulder. "You know my parents would help if—" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not taking money from your family." "Then what are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer. Later that evening, I heard the front door open, followed by laughter, genuine, unburdened laughter that had become rare in our house. I emerged from my room to find my parents and Olivia in the living room, their faces flushed with excitement. "Tyler," my mother beckoned me over. "You won't believe it. The investors loved Olivia's pitch. They're going to fund the entire project." "That's great," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. This should have been good news. Maybe Olivia could finally pay back my college fund. "We're going out to celebrate," my father announced. "Get your coat." "Actually," I held up the housing email I'd printed out. "I need to talk to you about something." My mother took the paper, scanning it quickly. "Oh, that's wonderful. You and Ethan will be roommates." "I need $2,200 for the deposit," I said. "By next week." The celebration in the room dimmed. My parents exchanged glances. "Well," my father started, "this investor funding is just the beginning. It will take some time before—" "How much are they investing?" I interrupted, looking directly at my sister. Olivia stepped forward. $850,000, she said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "They're taking a 35% stake, but—" "So you have money now," I said, looking directly at my sister. "You can pay back my college fund." The room fell silent. Olivia looked uncomfortable, glancing at our parents for support. "Tyler," my mother's voice took on the pacifying tone she used when explaining why things couldn't be fair. The investment money isn't for personal use. It's for the business. My college fund wasn't for personal use either, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. It was for my education. You got a scholarship, Olivia said defensively. You don't even need— I still need $15,000 per year, I cut her off, plus housing, books, and living expenses. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. The business will take time to generate profit. Once it does, of course Olivia will pay you back. When? I pressed, because I need the housing deposit in 10 days or I lose my spot. We'll figure something out, my mother assured me. The same empty promise I'd heard for months. Like what? I gestured to the paperwork spread across the kitchen table. Because that's what I've been doing all day, trying to figure out how to go into debt for an education that was supposed to be paid for. Tyler, please, my mother implored. This is Olivia's moment. Can't we just celebrate tonight and worry about this tomorrow? I looked at them, my mother's pleading eyes, my father's uncomfortable stance, Olivia's mixture of guilt and defensiveness, and something inside me hardened. No, I said simply. We can't. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. No. A complete sentence, a boundary. The first of many I would learn to draw. The silence that followed my refusal stretched uncomfortably. My parents looked at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. In our family, celebrations for Olivia's potential successes were mandatory, regardless of how many times those potentials had fizzled into failures. I think I'll skip dinner, I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. I need to finish these loan applications. Tyler, my father started, but I was already walking back to the kitchen table. I could feel their eyes on me as I sat down and picked up my pen. This wasn't the Tyler they knew, the peacekeeper, the one who went along with family decisions, without complaint. The one who understood that Olivia's needs came first. After a moment of hushed conversation, I heard the front door open and close. The house fell silent. They had gone without me. Instead of feeling hurt, I felt strangely liberated. For the next 3 hours, I researched every possible financial option, additional scholarships, work-study programs, part-time jobs near campus. I created spreadsheets detailing potential income sources, projected expenses, and timelines. By midnight, I had a plan, not a perfect one, but a path forward that depended on no one but myself. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Bringing you leftovers. Love you. I didn't respond. When they returned, I was still at the kitchen table, surrounded by notes and printouts. My mother placed a takeout container beside me. We missed you at dinner, she said softly. I nodded without looking up. Tyler, I know you're upset, she continued, but you have to understand. I do understand, I interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. I understand perfectly. She seemed taken aback by my tone. Not angry, not tearful, but detached, as if I were discussing the weather rather than the betrayal that had altered the course of my life. Your father and I have been talking, she ventured. We might be able to help with the housing deposit. We could put it on a credit card. I figured it out, I said, gesturing to my notes. I don't need your help. My mother's expression flickered between relief and concern. That's good, but you shouldn't have to do this alone. Shouldn't I? I asked mildly. Isn't that what being the capable one means? My words hit their mark. My mother flinched, then reached for my hand. Tyler, we never meant to hurt you. I gently withdrew my hand. Intent doesn't change impact. It was something my computer science teacher had said during a class discussion about ethical algorithm design. I hadn't understood how profoundly true it was until now. My mother's eyes welled with tears. This was the moment I was supposed to backpedal, to comfort her, to assure her that everything was fine. That's what Tyler would have done. The old Tyler. Instead, I gathered my papers into a neat stack. I'm going to bed. I have an early shift at the tech shop tomorrow. I left her standing in the kitchen, her expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. The expected guilt didn't come. In its place was a strange, quiet certainty. I was changing, becoming someone new out of necessity. The next morning, I woke before dawn and dressed quietly. As I passed Olivia's door, I paused. My relationship with my sister had always been complicated. I didn't hate her. In many ways, she was as much a product of our parents' uneven nurturing as I was. She, the perpetually rescued, me, the perpetually self-sufficient. But understanding didn't equate to acceptance, not anymore. At the tech repair shop, I approached my manager, Dave, as soon as he arrived. I need more hours, I said without preamble. As many as you can give me. Dave raised an eyebrow. College fund not covering everything? Something like that. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. I can give you 3 additional shifts. And if you're willing to do some remote tech support after hours, that's another 15 hours a week you can do from home. I'll take all of it, I said. By the end of my shift, my schedule had nearly doubled. It wouldn't be enough for tuition, but it would cover the housing deposit. A start. When I arrived home, I found an envelope on my bed. Inside was $800 in cash and a note in my father's handwriting. Tyler, for your housing deposit. No strings. Attached. We love you, Dad. I stared at the money, emotions warring within me. Relief. I wouldn't have to work myself to exhaustion before the deadline. Anger. This sudden generosity only came after I'd shown I could manage without them. Suspicion. Where had this money come from when just yesterday they couldn't help? My door opened and my father stood in the doorway, his expression cautious. Did you find the envelope? He asked. I nodded. Where did it come from? He shifted uncomfortably. I spoke with Olivia this morning, explained the situation. Understanding dawned. So this is from her? From Olivia's new investor funds, my father corrected. She agreed it was the right thing to do. After you told her to, I said flatly. My father sighed. Does it matter? The deposit is covered. You can room with Ethan. It matters, I said quietly. It matters that it took me refusing to play my usual role for anyone to consider that I deserved what was promised to me. My father looked genuinely bewildered. Tyler, we've always supported you. You've always expected me to support myself, I corrected. While supporting Olivia, there's a difference. I picked up the envelope and extended it toward him. Tell Olivia, thank you, but I've already figured out how to cover the deposit. My father's eyes widened. Don't be proud, Tyler, just take the money. It's not about pride, I said. It's about trust. I don't trust that this money comes without expectations. I don't trust that next week or next month there won't be another crisis where Olivia needs it back. That's not fair, he protested. Isn't it? I kept my arm outstretched, the envelope suspended between us like a physical manifestation of the chasm that had opened in our relationship. After a long moment, my father took the envelope. "Keep it for now," I said. "If Olivia's business succeeds, like you all believe it will, she can pay back my entire college fund, not just a portion of the housing deposit." My father nodded slowly, a new weariness in his eyes as he regarded me, as if seeing for the first time that his reliable, accommodating son had begun transforming into someone altogether different, someone who would no longer accept less than he deserved. The week after I refused Olivia's money changed the atmosphere in our house. My parents walked on eggshells around me, unsure how to navigate this new version of their son who no longer conformed to their expectations. Olivia avoided me entirely, slipping out of rooms when I entered as if my presence made her physically uncomfortable. I focused on my plan. Each day after school, I worked at the tech shop. Each night, I applied for scholarships and small grants. Each morning, I checked my bank account balance, watching it grow incrementally. On Wednesday, I received an email from Professor Chen, my advanced placement computer science teacher. "Tyler, I'm putting together a list of candidates for the Turing Innovation Scholarship. The award is $8,000 per year for students demonstrating exceptional aptitude in computer science and mathematics. I'd like to nominate you. Can you stop by my classroom tomorrow to discuss?" The Turing Scholarship wasn't on any of the lists I'd researched. It was local, under the radar, exactly the kind of opportunity I needed. I replied immediately, confirming I would meet with him. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, another change in the household dynamic, as I'd taken over meal preparation to free up more of my mother's time for extra shifts at her accounting firm, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Tyler Mercer?" The voice was male, elderly, with a crisp professionalism that immediately commanded attention. "Yes, this is he." "Tyler, my name is Dr. Jonathan Turing. I understand Professor Chen is nominating you for my scholarship." I nearly dropped the spatula I was holding. "Dr. Turing, yes, he mentioned it just today. Robert has excellent judgment when it comes to students with potential," Dr. Turing continued. "But I prefer to make my own assessments as well. Are you available to meet this Saturday at the Westfield Tech Hub at 10 a.m.? "Yes, absolutely," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my excitement. "Wonderful. Bring examples of your coding projects, particularly any innovative approaches you've developed. I'm interested in creativity as much as technical proficiency." After confirming the details, I hung up and leaned against the kitchen counter, allowing myself a moment of hope. $8,000 per year would make a significant dent in my financial gap. My mother entered the kitchen, eyeing the half-prepared meal. "Need any help?" "I've got it," I said, returning to the stove. "You've been cooking every night this week," she observed. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I replied simply. I didn't explain that taking control of household tasks was another way of establishing my independence, of demonstrating both to them and to myself that I could manage on my own. "Tyler," my mother hesitated, then continued, "your father and I have been talking. We think you should reconsider Olivia's offer. The money is just sitting there." I stirred the pasta sauce, keeping my back to her. I meant what I said. If Olivia wants to help, she can repay the entire college fund. That's not possible right now. The investor money is tied up in the business. Then my answer is still no. My mother sighed. "This isn't like you, Tyler. You've always been understanding about family matters." I turned to face her. "Maybe That's the problem. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. A moment later, my father called out, "Tyler, someone here to see you?" I turned off the stove and headed to the front door, where I found Ethan standing with a folder tucked under his arm. "Hey," he said, his expression unusually serious. "Can we talk?" We retreated to the backyard patio, away from listening ears. Ethan opened the folder and slid a printout toward me. "So, I was doing some research about your situation," he began, "and I found something interesting." The printout was from a legal website outlining custodial accounts for minors. I scanned the highlighted section. When funds are placed in custodial accounts designated for a minor's education, the custodian, typically the parent, has a fiduciary responsibility to manage those funds in the best interest of the minor. Using these funds for purposes other than the minor's benefit may constitute a breach of fiduciary duty. I looked up at Ethan. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he lowered his voice, "that if your grandparents set up that college fund specifically, for you, your parents might not have had the legal right to give it to Olivia." The possibility sent a shock through me. "You think what they did was illegal?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "It depends on how the account was set up, but it's worth looking into." "How would I even do that?" "My dad is a financial advisor," Ethan said. "He could help you understand what type of account it was and what rights you have. No pressure, but he's willing to meet with you if you want." I stared at the printout, a new awareness dawning. All this time, I'd accepted that my parents had the right to redistribute family money as they saw fit. But what if some of that money was legally mine? What if their decision wasn't just unfair, but improper? "When can I meet him?" I asked. 2 days later, I sat across from Michael Kaplan in his downtown office. Unlike my parents, who treated financial matters with vague hand-waving, Mr. Kaplan was precise and straightforward. "Based on what you've described," he said after hearing my story, "it sounds like your grandparents established a 529 education savings plan with you as the named beneficiary. Is that correct?" "I think so," I said. "They always called it my college fund." Mr. Kaplan nodded. "And your parents were the account custodians?" When I confirmed this, he continued, "While custodians have some flexibility in managing 529 funds, using the money for someone other than the named beneficiary, especially for purposes unrelated to education, is problematic." "Problematic how?" "Potentially a breach of fiduciary duty," he explained. "Additionally, depending on the circumstances, there could be tax implications." He leaned forward. "Tyler, do you have any documentation about this account? Statements?" "The original paperwork?" I shook my head. "My parents handled everything." "I see." Mr. Kaplan tapped his pen thoughtfully. "You have a right to request information about accounts established for your benefit. I can help draft a letter requesting that information. And if they refuse, there are options," he said carefully. "But let's start with the request. Sometimes, simply letting people know you understand your rights is enough to change the conversation." As I left Mr. Kaplan's office, clutching a folder of information he'd prepared for me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. Not the false power of being labeled the capable one, but the genuine empowerment that comes with knowledge. My parents had always controlled the narrative about family resources. They decided what was fair, what was necessary, who deserved what. For the first time, I understood that their authority wasn't absolute, that there were rules and Boundaries even they had to respect. I hadn't been searching for leverage. I'd simply been trying to find a way forward on my own. But now I had something unexpected, a legitimate claim, backed by law. The question was, what would I do with it? Saturday morning arrived with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. My meeting with Dr. Turing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but I woke at 5:30, meticulously organizing my coding portfolio and preparing my presentation. This scholarship represented more than money. It was validation, recognition of my worth outside the distorted mirror of my family's perception. I dressed carefully in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, professional but not pretentious. As I gathered my materials, I heard movement in the kitchen. Olivia was rarely up this early, especially on weekends. Curiosity pulled me downstairs. I found my sister hunched over her laptop at the kitchen island, hair pulled into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. The table was covered with spreadsheets, business plans, and half-empty coffee cups. She looked up when I entered, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, moving to the coffee maker. "You're up early." "Never went to sleep," she admitted. "The investors want revised projections by Monday." I nodded, unsure what to say. The familiar pattern would be to offer help, to sit beside her and fix her formulas, optimize her spreadsheets, clean up her presentation. It's what I'd always done. "Tyler, about the other night," she began, then faltered. I waited, coffee mug in hand. "I didn't know," she finally said. "About the college fund. I mean, I knew they helped me with the boutique, but I didn't realize it was your money specifically. Not until Dad told me." "Would it have mattered?" I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. She looked away, which was answer enough. "I've been thinking," she said after a moment, "about why I keep failing, about why nothing ever seems to work out the way I plan." She gestured to her scattered papers. "Even these projections. They're never wrong when we go over them together, but somehow when I implement them." The familiar invitation hung in the air. "Fix this for me, Tyler. Make it work." But for the first time, I recognized the pattern from the outside, saw it for what it was. "What do you think the problem is?" I asked instead of reaching for her spreadsheets. She blinked, surprised by the redirection. "I don't know. Bad luck? Poor timing? Or maybe," I suggested carefully, "it's because you always have a safety net. There's never any real consequence to failure because someone always catches you." Her face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I placed my mug in the sink. "I have to go. I have a meeting about a scholarship." "Tyler," she called as I headed for the door. "I am sorry. About the money." I paused. "I know, but sorry doesn't pay for Princeton." The Westfield Tech Hub was an impressive glass and steel structure downtown, a collaborative workspace for tech startups and innovation projects. I arrived 30 minutes early, reviewing my presentation one last time in the sleek lobby. At precisely 10 a.m., a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a shock of white hair approached. "Tyler Mercer?" "Dr. Turing," I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Thank you for being punctual," he replied, his grip surprisingly firm. In my experience, people who value others' time tend to value their own work as well. Come. He led me to a small conference room where, for the next 2 hours, he challenged me with coding problems, technical questions, and philosophical discussions about the future of artificial intelligence. It wasn't a conventional interview. It was a genuine exchange of ideas, a test not just of my knowledge but of my thought processes. Your approach to the neural network problem was particularly elegant, he noted as our session wound down. Most applicants brute force it, but you saw the pattern underlying the seeming chaos. Thank you, sir. He studied me over steepled fingers. Professor Chen tells me you're heading to Princeton. That's the plan. On scholarship, but with financial challenges, he added, not as a question. I nodded, unsurprised that he knew. Small academic circles always talked. The Turing Scholarship is $8,000 per year, he continued. Not enough to cover everything, but significant. Tell me, Mr. Mercer, why should I invest in you rather than the dozen other qualified candidates? The question was direct, unapologetic in its demand for self-advocacy. A month ago, I might have demurred, downplayed my qualifications, defaulted, to humility as I'd been trained to do in a family where standing out meant being expected to stand alone. Because I understand that innovation isn't just about code, it's about persistence, I said instead. I've spent my life solving problems with limited resources and no safety net. That's how I approach coding, finding elegant solutions when brute force isn't an option. Your investment won't just fund my education, it will launch a career dedicated to making technology more accessible to those who need elegant solutions the most. Dr. Turing's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. My decision will be finalized by Wednesday, he said, standing. Regardless of the outcome, Mr. Mercer, I suggest you continue developing that voice. Self-advocacy isn't arrogance when it's backed by substance. As I gathered my materials, he added, and for what it's worth, I find that the most innovative minds are often forged in circumstances where expectations and resources are inversely proportional. On the drive home, his words resonated with unexpected force. For years, I'd internalized the message that my capability was a reason to expect less support, less celebration, less investment. Dr. Turing had reframed it, my ability to thrive. With minimal resources wasn't just a family role I'd been assigned. It was a valuable skill, a competitive advantage in a world where elegant solutions mattered. I returned home to find a letter from my grandfather in the mail. Unusual, since he typically called rather than wrote. Inside was a brief note and a check for $3,000. Tyler, your grandmother and I are thrilled about Princeton. This is to help with expenses. It's not much, but it's what we can manage right now. We're proud of you. Love, Grandpa. I stared at the check, conflicting emotions washing over me. Gratitude for their support, anger that they'd had to step in where my parents had failed. Confusion about why they hadn't protected the original fund they'd established. My phone rang, my grandfather's number. "Did you get our letter?" he asked when I answered. "Just now. Thank you, Grandpa. It means a lot." "I wish it could be more," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We never intended for your college. Fund to be used for anything other than your education. The opening was perfect." "About that fund, do you remember how it was set up? What kind of account it was?" "Of course," he replied. "It was a 529 plan. Your grandmother and I established it the day you were born. We were the contributors, but we made your parents the custodians since we weren't sure we'd still be around. When you reached college age..." He paused. "Why do you ask?" I took a deep breath. Because I've learned that 529 plans have specific rules about how the money can be used. And funding Olivia's business venture wasn't an approved use. Silence stretched across the phone line. Then, I see. Grandpa, do you have any documentation about the account? The original paperwork? Statements? I should have copies in my files, he said slowly. Tyler, are you considering legal action? Against your parents? I'm trying to understand my options, I answered honestly. Right now, I just need information. Another long pause. I'll look through my records. But Tyler, whatever you decide, your grandmother and I support you. What they did wasn't right. His validation, simple and direct, broke something loose inside me. A dam holding back the righteous anger I'd been too afraid to fully acknowledge. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, the check still in my hand, contemplating the shifting landscape of my situation. Between the potential touring scholarship, my grandparents' contribution, my increased work hours, and the possibility of recovering my college fund, Princeton was becoming more attainable by the day. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about accountability, about recognition that what had happened wasn't just unfortunate circumstances, but a breach of trust with real consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. How'd the meeting with touring go? Good, I think. I replied, decision by Wednesday. My dad wants to know if you'd like to meet tomorrow to discuss next steps about the fund situation. I hesitated. Tomorrow was Sunday, traditionally reserved for family brunch, a tradition that had persisted despite the tensions of recent weeks. Skipping it would be another declaration of independence, another boundary drawn. What time? I texted back. Monday morning, my mother caught me as I was leaving for school, her expression unusually serious. Your father and I noticed you weren't at brunch yesterday, she said, trying to sound casual. We were worried. I had a meeting with Mr. Kaplan, I replied. Ethan's dad, about financial planning for college. Oh. She seemed surprised, perhaps even hurt that I'd sought advice elsewhere. Well, that's good, I suppose. Proactive. I nodded, keys in hand, ready to leave. Tyler, she continued, we've been talking about the housing deposit. Your father and I can cover it. We'll figure out the rest as we go. The familiar approach, solving the immediate crisis without addressing the underlying issue, expecting gratitude for the bare minimum. That's not necessary, I said. I've worked out a plan. What kind of plan? She asked, frowning. A comprehensive one, I replied. For all 4 years, not just the deposit. But how? Even with your scholarship and part-time work? I have options I'm exploring, I interrupted, including discussing with Grandpa the original terms of my 529 plan. The color drained from her face. Your grandfather? Why would you involve him? Because he and Grandma established the fund, I said simply. They have a right to know how it was used. Tyler, this is a family matter. We can handle it without what? Without accountability? Without acknowledging that what happened wasn't just an unfortunate circumstance, but a deliberate choice to prioritize Olivia's wants over my needs? Again? The words hung between us, sharper than I'd intended, but honest in a way our family rarely was. That's not fair, she whispered. I'm beginning to think that's exactly what it is, I replied, and walked out the door. School passed in a blur. By lunch, Rumors were circulating that I'd been nominated for the prestigious Turing Scholarship, something the administration had apparently announced in the faculty meeting. Teachers regarded me with new interest, and classmates who'd rarely spoken to me beyond group projects suddenly wanted to discuss college plans. The attention was disorienting after years of quiet achievement. I retreated to the computer lab, seeking solitude, only to find Professor Chen waiting for me. "There you are," he said, looking up from his laptop. "I wanted to check in. How did the meeting with Turing go?" "Well, I think," I said, sliding into a chair. "He's intense." Chen laughed. "That's diplomatic. He's brilliant and demanding, but fair. He only meets candidates he's seriously considering. He said he'd decide by Wednesday. Good sign. He usually takes longer." Chen closed his laptop. "Tyler, there's something else I wanted to discuss. The department has a paid internship position this summer, helping develop our new computer science curriculum. It's typically reserved for college students, but I convinced the principal to consider you." "Seriously?" My mind raced with calculations. A paid summer internship would significantly boost my savings before Princeton. 20 hours a week, decent pay, and it would look exceptional on your resume, Chen continued. "Think of it as an investment in potential. You'd be helping us, but we'd also be helping launch you." For the second time in days, an adult was offering not charity or obligation, but genuine investment in my future, recognizing value rather than exploiting capability. "I'm definitely interested," I said, unable to keep the enthusiasm from my voice. "Excellent. I'll send you the formal application, but consider it a formality." As I walked to my next class, a new thought crystallized. There was an entire world beyond my family's distorted economics, where contribution and support existed in healthy balance, where capability was rewarded rather than taxed. That evening, I arrived home to find my parents and Olivia in the living room, an impromptu family meeting evidently in progress. They fell silent when I entered, the awkward pause confirming I was the topic of discussion. "Tyler," my father began, "your mother mentioned you've been talking to Grandpa about your college fund." "I have," I confirmed, remaining standing by the door, backpack still slung over my shoulder, physically and symbolically maintaining distance. "We're concerned about the direction this is taking," he continued, "involving your grandparents, consulting with Ethan's father. These steps feel adversarial." "They're informational," I corrected. "I'm educating myself about my options." "Options for what exactly?" my mother asked, her voice tight with anxiety. I considered my words carefully. "For ensuring I can attend Princeton without crippling debt, and for addressing the improper use of funds that were legally designated for my education." "Improper use?" My father's tone sharpened. "We're your parents. We made a decision about family resources in a time of need." "Except they weren't just family resources," I countered. "They were specifically designated for my education in a 529 plan. Using them for Olivia's business venture wasn't just unfair, it potentially violated the terms of the account." Olivia spoke for the first time, her voice small. "Are you saying what they did was illegal?" "I'm saying it may have breached fiduciary duty," I replied, the technical term from Mr. Kaplan's briefing feeling formal but precise. "And yes, potentially violated tax laws governing 529 plans." "This is ridiculous." My father stood, gesturing emphatically. "We're not some corporation mismanaging funds. We're your parents, making difficult decisions for our family's welfare." "And I'm your son," I replied evenly, making difficult decisions for my future. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Tyler, please, we can work this out as a family. There's no need for legal terminology or threats. I haven't made any threats, I pointed out. I've asked for information about an account established for my benefit, and I've consulted advisors about my options. Those are rational steps anyone would take when faced with a significant financial shortfall. What do you want from us? My father asked, his anger giving way to weariness. Transparency, accountability, a concrete plan to restore what was taken, not vague assurances that things will work out somehow. I paused. An acknowledgement that what happened wasn't just an unfortunate circumstance, but a pattern of prioritizing Olivia's wants over my needs. The room fell silent. My parents exchanged glances, a wordless conversation I couldn't interpret. Olivia stared at her hands, shoulders hunched. We need time to discuss this, my father finally said. Take all the time you need, I replied. I have a plan that doesn't depend on your decision. I'm simply offering you the opportunity to be part of the solution, rather than continuing to be the problem. With that, I headed upstairs, the weight of the confrontation settling into a strange, calm certainty. For the first time, I had spoken the unvarnished truth without softening it to protect their feelings, without assuming responsibility for managing the family's emotional equilibrium. In my room, I found an email from Dr. Turing waiting in my inbox. Mr. Mercer, after careful consideration, I am pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Turing Innovation Scholarship. The award of $8,000 per year will be disbursed directly to Princeton to offset your educational expenses, renewable annually provided you maintain a 3.7 GPA in your computer science coursework. Additionally, I serve on the board of Next Gen Technologies, which offers a paid summer internship program for promising computer science students. While typically reserved for those already enrolled in college, exceptions can be made. If you're interested, please contact my assistant to schedule an interview. Congratulations on your selection. I look forward to following your progress at Princeton and beyond. Regards, Jonathan Turing, Ph.D. The validation was staggering. Not just the financial support, but the recognition from someone who had no obligation to me, who saw value in my potential without the complicated lens of family dynamics. I forwarded the email to Professor Chen with a brief note of thanks, then to Ethan, who responded immediately with a flurry of celebratory texts. Then, after a moment's consideration, I forwarded it to my grandfather as well, adding, "Thank you for believing in me." His response came minutes later. "We never doubted you, Tyler. I found the original 529 documentation. Coming to see you tomorrow. This ends now." A strange calm settled over me. The pieces were falling into place, not through luck or charity, but through my own advocacy, through refusing to accept the limitations imposed by my family's distorted priorities. My phone rang. Olivia. I hesitated before answering. "Tyler?" Her voice was subdued. "Can we talk? Not here, somewhere private." "Why?" "Because I need to tell you something about the investor funding, something Mom and Dad don't know." 20 minutes later, we sat in her car in the empty high school parking lot, the engine running for heat in the cool spring evening. Olivia stared straight ahead, fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. "The investor funding fell through," she finally said. 3 days ago, they pulled out." I absorbed this, unsurprised but curious why she was telling me. Does this relate to my college fund? Yes and no. She sighed, turning to face me. When the investors backed out, I panicked. I knew I'd have to tell Mom and Dad, but I also knew they'd already stretched themselves thin helping me. So I went to Continental Bank and applied for a business loan using their house as collateral. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Without telling them? She nodded miserably. Dad co-signed for my first business loan 2 years ago. I still had the paperwork with his signature. I used it to create a new application. She swallowed hard. They approved it yesterday, $250,000. Olivia. I stared at her, stunned by the magnitude of what she'd done. That's fraud. I know. Her voice broke. I was desperate. I thought if I could just get the business going, make it work this time, no one would ever know. But then tonight, hearing, you talk about fiduciary duty and legal obligations. She wiped at her eyes. I can't do it. I can't take the money. But I don't know how to tell them without destroying what little faith they have left in me. The familiar pattern beckoned. Fix Olivia's mess. Protect her from consequences. Maintain the family equilibrium at the expense of my own well-being. But that pattern had led us here, to this moment of potential catastrophe. You have to tell them, I said firmly. Tonight, before any money changes hands. Will you come with me? She pleaded. Not to take responsibility, she added quickly, seeing my expression. Just to help me explain. You're better with words, with staying calm. I weighed the request. On one hand, this was Olivia's mess to clean up. On the other, the consequences would affect our parents, and potentially me if it somehow impacted their ability to help with college expenses. I'll be there when you tell them, I finally agreed, but only if you promise me something. What? That this is the last time, the last bailout, the last rescue, the last time our family orients itself around your crises. She flinched but nodded slowly. I promise. The conversation that followed in our living room was as devastating as I'd expected. My father's face ashen with disbelief, my mother collapsing onto the sofa in tears, Olivia stumbling through her explanation and apology. I was going to sign the papers tomorrow, she concluded, but I won't. I'll call the bank in the morning. Tell them I'm withdrawing the application. They have our house information now, my father said, his voice hollow. They've run credit checks, seen our mortgage status. Which is what exactly? I asked, the question emerging before I could consider its implications. My parents exchanged glances. We're behind, my mother admitted. 3 months. We've been juggling bills, trying to keep everything afloat with Olivia's expenses and the money we put into her boutique. The final piece clicked into place. They hadn't just given Olivia my college fund. They'd done it while neglecting their own financial stability, creating a cascade of consequences that now threatened their home. So even if Olivia withdraws the fraudulent application, I clarified, you're still facing potential foreclosure? My father nodded, unable to meet my eyes. We've been hoping to catch up once her business took off. But now, the irony was almost too perfect. They had sacrificed my educational fund for Olivia's business, and now might lose their home due to the same misplaced priorities. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex mix of emotions: frustration at their poor decisions, concern for their welfare despite everything, and an odd sense of clarity about my own path forward. I need to think, I said, standing. We all do. In my room, I spread out all the documentation I'd gathered. The information from Mr. Kaplan about 529 plans, Dr. Turing's scholarship offer, Professor Chen's internship opportunity, my grandparents, check, my own savings calculations. Then I added this new information, my parents' mortgage crisis, Olivia's near-catastrophic fraud attempt. A plan began to form, not born of obligation or family responsibility, but of strategic calculation. My parents had leveraged my future for Olivia's benefit, making a bet that failed spectacularly. Now I had the opportunity to leverage their precarious situation for a different kind of return, one that might finally reset our family's dysfunctional dynamics while securing my own path forward. I began drafting an email to my grandfather, outlining a proposition that would change everything. By morning, I would offer my parents a choice, not an ultimatum, but a clear-eyed assessment of our new reality and the options it presented. For too long, our family had operated on emotional economics, Olivia's needs trumping all, my capability being taxed rather than nurtured, their parental authority unquestioned despite increasingly poor decisions. It was time for a new financial model, one based on accountability, transparent terms, and mutual benefit. As I typed, a sense of purpose solidified within me. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about establishing a new paradigm where my worth wasn't determined by my willingness to sacrifice, where capability wasn't penalized but respected. By midnight, the framework was complete, a proposal that would solve multiple problems, simultaneously while fundamentally restructuring our family's power dynamics. It was elegant, comprehensive, and entirely dependent on my parents' willingness to finally acknowledge the true costs of their choices. I saved the document, a strange calm settling over me. Tomorrow would be a reckoning, but also potentially a new beginning, not just for my college journey, but for our family's understanding of value, investment, and the true meaning of support. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Everything okay? You went radio silent after the scholarship news." "Family drama," I replied. "But I think I've found a solution, a permanent one." "Sounds ominous," he texted back. "Need backup?" I smiled at his loyalty. "Not this time. But thanks. Whatever you're planning, remember what my dad always says. In negotiations, the person who needs the deal least has the most power." His words resonated with unexpected force. For the first time in my life, that person was me. While my parents faced potential foreclosure, while Olivia grappled with her latest failure, I had options: scholarships, internships, opportunities based on my merit rather than family obligation. The realization was both liberating and sobering. The power dynamics that had defined our family for so long had shifted, not through confrontation or defiance, but through the simple reality that I now had alternatives they didn't. Tomorrow, I would offer them a path forward, not as the dutiful son seeking approval, but as an equal party to a transaction with terms and conditions reflecting this new reality. As I drifted toward sleep, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Sometimes the most profound form of self-advocacy isn't fighting against an unfair system, but creating an entirely new one where your value is recognized not as an obligation, but as an asset. The next morning, I woke early. The framework of my plan crystallized into something concrete and actionable. My grandfather would be arriving at 10 a.m. with the 529 documentation. Before then, I needed to refine my proposal into something my parents couldn't easily dismiss, a solution that addressed everyone's needs while establishing a new power dynamic based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I showered and dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks, deliberate professional attire that signaled the seriousness of what I was about to propose. Image mattered in negotiations. This subtle shift from my usual weekend t-shirt and jeans was intentional. Downstairs, the kitchen was silent. A note on the refrigerator in my mother's handwriting informed me they had gone to meet with a mortgage counselor about their situation, taking Olivia with them. The timing was perfect. I would have the house to myself when my grandfather arrived, avoiding any immediate confrontation while I gathered the final pieces of information I needed. At precisely 10 a.m., my grandfather's dark blue sedan pulled into our driveway. He emerged carrying a leather portfolio, his expression serious but resolute. At 72, Thomas Mercer still moved with the confident stride of the former corporate attorney he was, his analytical mind undimmed by retirement. "Tyler," he greeted me with a brief hug. "You look like you're ready for a board meeting." "Something like that," I admitted, leading him to the dining room where I'd set up my laptop and documents in an organized display. He raised an eyebrow at the setup. "I see you've inherited more than just my stubbornness." "Preparation is leverage," I replied, quoting one of his favorite sayings. "Indeed." He placed the portfolio on the table and opened it carefully. "I've brought everything. The original 529 plan documentation, quarterly statements, tax forms, the works." He removed a thick folder and slid it toward me. "It's all here, including the withdrawal forms your parents submitted." I opened the folder with reverent care. The first document was the original paperwork establishing the 529 plan, dated 3 weeks after my birth. My name was clearly listed as the beneficiary, with my parents as primary custodians and my grandfather as backup custodian. Most importantly, there was a specific provision that the funds were explicitly designated for the higher education of Tyler James Mercer and could not be reallocated without written consent from both custodians and the backup custodian. "They would have needed your signature to legally change the beneficiary," I said, looking up from the document. "Exactly," my grandfather confirmed. "Which I never provided, nor was I ever asked to." I flipped through the quarterly statements, tracking the growth of the account over 18 years. Regular contributions from my grandparents, occasional ones from my parents in the early years, compound interest gradually building the balance. The final statement dated 5 months ago showed a balance of 74,928 36. "The next folder contains withdrawal records," my grandfather said quietly. 3 large withdrawals over 6 weeks had emptied the account entirely. Each withdrawal form bore both my parents' signatures, with the stated purpose marked as qualified educational expenses. "But it wasn't for educational expenses," I said, anger rising. "It was for Olivia's business." "Which makes it not just wrong, but potentially fraudulent," my grandfather replied. He removed a separate envelope from his portfolio. "I've had my attorney draft a letter outlining the breach of fiduciary duty and the potential tax implications. It's not a lawsuit, yet, but a formal notice that can be escalated if necessary." I took the envelope, feeling its weight both physically and symbolically. "I'm not sure I want to go legal." "Having the option and exercising it are different things," he reminded me. "Sometimes the most effective negotiation tool is one you never have to use." We spent the next hour reviewing my plan, my grandfather offering insights from his years of corporate law and negotiations. By the time we heard cars in the driveway signaling my family's return, we had refined my proposal into something both pragmatic and powerful. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" my grandfather asked as we gathered our materials. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time in my life, I'm negotiating from a position of strength. The front door opened, voices filtering into the dining room, my mother's weary tone, my father's resigned responses, Olivia's subdued murmurs. They fell silent when they entered and found us waiting for them. "Dad," my mother said, surprise evident in her voice. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting my grandson," he replied simply. "You might want to sit down. Tyler has something to propose." My father's gaze shifted between us, wariness creeping into his expression as he noted the formal arrangement of documents, my grandfather's presence, my uncharacteristically professional attire. "What is this?" he asked. "A solution," I replied, gesturing to the chairs. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." Reluctantly, they settled around the table. My parents across from me, Olivia to the side, my grandfather beside me in a visual alignment that wasn't lost on anyone. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to clarify that this isn't an attack or an ultimatum. It's a proposal that addresses several problems simultaneously while establishing new parameters for our family dynamics." "Parameters?" My mother frowned. "Tyler, we're not a business arrangement." "Aren't we?" I countered. "For years, our family has operated on implicit terms. Olivia's needs come first. My capability means I need less support. Your parental authority is absolute, regardless of the consequences of your decisions. Those terms haven't served any of us well." I opened the folder containing the 529 documentation. Let's start with the facts. 18 years ago, Grandpa and Grandma established a 529 education savings plan with me as the sole beneficiary. The final balance before withdrawals was $74,928.36. 5 months ago, you emptied that account completely to fund Olivia's boutique venture, which has since failed. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Tyler, we've acknowledged this was a mistake." "I'm not interested in acknowledgments," I interrupted. "I'm interested in solutions. The fact is, those withdrawals weren't just unfair, they were potentially illegal. The funds were explicitly designated for my education, and using them for Olivia's business constituted a breach of fiduciary duty." I slid the attorney's letter across the table. "This outlines the legal implications, including potential tax penalties and civil liability." My mother's face paled as she scanned the letter. "You're threatening legal action against us? Your own parents?" "I'm presenting options," I corrected, "one of which is legal recourse. But that's not my preferred path." "What do you want?" "Tyler?" my father asked, his voice strained. "I want what was promised to me," I replied. "But more importantly, I want a reset of our family dynamics, a new arrangement based on mutual respect rather than obligation." I opened my laptop and turned it to face them, displaying a spreadsheet I'd prepared. "Here's my proposal. Grandpa has offered to serve as an intermediary in creating a formal repayment plan. You will sign a legally binding agreement to repay the full amount of the 529 fund over the next 5 years, with monthly payments deposited into a new account in my name." 5 years? My mother looked stricken. "Tyler, we're facing potential foreclosure. We can barely make our mortgage payments, let alone—" "I'm aware," I interrupted, which brings me to the second part of my proposal. I clicked to the next slide, showing a different set of calculations. According to public records, you owe approximately $287,000 on your mortgage, with a current market value of around $450,000. You're 3 months behind in payments, which means the bank could begin foreclosure proceedings at any time. My father's eyes narrowed. How do you know all this? Public records and the conversation I overheard last night, I replied. The point is, your financial situation is precarious, largely due to the resources you've diverted to Olivia's failed ventures. Olivia flinched but remained silent, her gaze fixed on the table. I've spoken with Grandpa about establishing a new mortgage arrangement, I continued. He would purchase your existing mortgage from the bank at its current balance. You would then make payments to him at a reduced interest rate, which would ease your immediate financial burden. Additionally, you would sign a legal document acknowledging the 529 debt, which would be gradually repaid as a second position lien on the house. The stunned silence that followed was broken by my father's incredulous question. You want to become our lender? Not me personally. Not yet, anyway. Grandpa would serve as the initial intermediary, but the terms would be structured so that when I turn 25, the mortgage note would transfer to me if the 529 debt hasn't been fully repaid. This is insane, my mother whispered. You're our son, not our banker. And you're my parents, not my investment advisors, I countered. Yet you made investment decisions with my money without my consent. I'm simply proposing a framework where everyone's interests are protected going forward. There has to be another way, my father insisted. There is, I acknowledged. You can reject this proposal, in which case Grandpa is prepared to pursue legal action regarding the misappropriated 529 funds. Meanwhile, your bank will likely begin foreclosure proceedings within the next 30 days based on your payment history. You'll lose the house, damage your credit for years to come, and still owe me the money that was legally designated for my education. My grandfather spoke for the first time, his tone measured but firm. Richard, Diana, I understand this feels uncomfortably transactional, but consider the alternative. This arrangement would save your home, reduce your monthly payments, and establish a clear path to making things right with Tyler, all while avoiding costly legal battles that would benefit no one. My parents exchanged glances, the weight of the situation evident in their expressions. What about me? Olivia finally spoke, her voice small. Where do I fit in this new arrangement? I turned to face her directly. That depends on you. This plan assumes you'll become financially independent. No more family bailouts, no more undermining everyone else's stability for your ventures. If you choose to continue living at home, you'll pay rent that contributes to the mortgage payments. If you move out, that's fine too. But the cycle of sacrificing everyone else's financial health for your projects ends today. Fair enough, my father acknowledged. But legal documents can't rebuild trust. Only consistent actions over time can do that. We're asking for the opportunity to prove, beyond the financial arrangements, that we understand how we failed you and want to do better. Their sincerity gave me pause. I'd been prepared for grudging acceptance of the financial terms, perhaps even resentment at being forced into this position. I hadn't expected this level of self-awareness or willingness to address the deeper issues. I appreciate that, I said carefully, and I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. But it will take time. We understand, my mother nodded. We've also been thinking about your Princeton expenses, the housing deposit, books, living costs. Even with your scholarship and the Turing Award, there's still a gap. I've worked it out, I assured them. Between my savings, Grandpa's contribution and the internship Professor Chen arranged, I can manage. We know you can, my father said. You've always been resourceful. But we'd like to contribute something additional, not from the repayment plan, but from our own current resources. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. We've liquidated some stocks we had held separately from our other finances, he explained. It's not everything you need, but it's what we can do right now, today, to show our commitment to supporting your education. I stared at the check, a complex wave of emotions washing over me. It wasn't about the money, though it would certainly help with immediate expenses, but about what it represented. A concrete action taken specifically to support me, not as an afterthought or obligation, but as a priority. Thank you, I said simply. This helps. There's one more thing, my mother added. We've been thinking about the mortgage arrangement, about you potentially becoming our lender when you turn 25. I tensed, anticipating resistance to this aspect of the proposal. We've decided we're okay with it, she continued, surprising me. Not just as a financial necessity, but as a symbol of how much we trust your judgment and integrity. If anyone's going to hold a lien on our home, it should be someone who has demonstrated more financial responsibility at 18 than we have in our entire adult lives. The admission was startling in its frankness, a level of humility I'd rarely seen from either of them. I don't want to be your lender out of punishment or retribution, I clarified. It's about establishing clear accountability while helping you avoid foreclosure. We understand, my father nodded, and we're grateful for the opportunity to make this right, even if it comes in an unconventional form. We spent the next hour reviewing and signing the documents, the mortgage restructuring agreement, the 5/29 repayment plan, the terms regarding Olivia's new independence. With each signature, I felt a shift in our family's foundation, a recalibration of expectations and responsibilities that had been long overdue. As we completed the final document, my father looked up with an expression I couldn't immediately interpret. You know, Tyler, throughout this process, I've been thinking about something your grandfather told me years ago, when we were considering using your college fund for Olivia's first business attempt. He advised against it, said it would set a dangerous precedent. What did you tell him? I asked, curious about this previously unknown interaction. That we knew what was best for our family, my father admitted ruefully. That sometimes parental wisdom meant making difficult choices for the greater good. He warned us then that true parental wisdom included respecting the boundaries between family members' resources and futures. He shook his head. We should have listened. Why didn't you? The question had lingered for months, the core mystery behind their decision. My mother answered, her voice soft but steady. Because it was easier than admitting we'd failed Olivia by never teaching her to stand on her own. Because it was easier than watching her struggle when you seemed so capable of handling anything life threw at you. Because we confused enabling with love and independence with abandonment. The honesty was disarming, a recognition of the flawed thinking that had led us here, without excuses or deflection. I appreciate your candor, I said. And while I can't forget what happened, I'm willing to move forward under these new terms. Not just the legal ones, but the relational ones as well. The commitment to respect boundaries, to recognize everyone's autonomy, to understand that love doesn't mean sacrificing one child's needs for another's. As we gathered the signed documents, A weight seemed to lift from the room, not the complete resolution of all our issues, but the establishment of a framework within which healing could begin. "I have the housing deposit due tomorrow," I mentioned as we concluded. "With your contribution and my savings, I can submit it on time." "We'll drive you to the bank in the morning," my father offered, "unless you'd prefer to handle it independently." The question acknowledged my autonomy, respecting my right to manage my own affairs without assumption or interference. It was a small thing, but significant in its recognition of the change dynamic between us. I'd appreciate the ride, I decided. And maybe we could discuss the logistics of moving to Princeton afterward. I'll need to coordinate transportation, shipping some belongings. "We'd like that," my mother smiled, a genuine warmth I hadn't seen directed at me in months. As they left to prepare dinner, I sent a text to my grandfather. "Agreement signed. Thank you for everything." His reply came moments later. "Proud of you, Tyler, not just for standing up for yourself, but for finding a solution that offers everyone a path forward. That's true strength, not just winning, but creating a framework where everyone can grow." I considered his words, recognizing the profound truth in them. This hadn't been about punishment or revenge, about making my parents suffer as I had. It had been about breaking a dysfunctional cycle, establishing clear boundaries, and creating accountability within a framework of mutual respect. In doing so, I hadn't just secured my college funding or established consequences for broken promises. I'd potentially liberated our entire family from patterns that had constrained us all. My parents from their enabling behaviors, Olivia from her dependence, myself from the role of capable but overlooked facilitator. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Turing. "Mr. Mercer, please confirm your availability for an interview with Next Gen Technologies this Friday at 2 p.m. The summer internship would begin June 15th, pending your acceptance." I replied immediately, confirming my availability. Another piece falling into place, another step toward the future I was constructing, not in reaction to family dynamics, but in alignment with my own goals and potential. As evening settled, over our house, I stood at my bedroom window, gazing at the neighborhood where I'd grown up. In less than 3 months, I would leave for Princeton, stepping into a new chapter defined by my choices rather than family limitations. But I wouldn't be leaving behind a broken family trapped in dysfunctional patterns. Instead, we were all embarking on something new, a reset that offered everyone the opportunity to grow beyond the roles we'd been assigned or had accepted. My parents would learn to support without enabling, to respect boundaries rather than assuming authority. Olivia would discover her own capability without the safety net that had paradoxically undermined her confidence. And I would continue developing the voice Dr. Turing had encouraged, the ability to advocate for myself without apology, to recognize my worth not as a burden to be minimized, but as an asset to be developed. The path forward wouldn't be without challenges. Trust, once broken, required time and consistent evidence to rebuild. Old patterns had a way of reasserting themselves in moments of stress or uncertainty. But for the first time, we had a framework that acknowledged these dangers and established clear mechanisms for accountability. And somewhere in the future, possibly when I turned 25, I might indeed become my parents' mortgage lender, not as a punishment or power play, but as the natural consequence of choices made and lessons learned. A reminder that family, relationships, while rooted in love, must also be grounded in respect for individual boundaries and futures. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had justified taking my college fund because I was the capable one, the child who could figure things out on my own. In doing exactly that, figuring out a solution independently, I had transformed from the overlooked, exploited son into someone whose capability was now recognized not as a reason to expect less, but as a strength to be respected. It wasn't the family dynamic I would have chosen or the path to Princeton I had envisioned, but perhaps it was the transformation we had all needed, a forced reckoning with patterns that had limited everyone, disguised as love, but functioning as constraint. As night fell, I turned from the window to my desk, where Princeton materials awaited my attention. Tomorrow would bring new steps forward in this recalibrated family, this reset relationship built on clearer terms and expectations. And while I couldn't predict every challenge we would face, I moved forward with a confidence born not of naivety, but of hard-won insight. That sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice or accommodation, but the courage to establish boundaries that allow everyone to grow into their fullest potential. 12 years later, I sat in my downtown office overlooking the Princeton Financial District, reviewing the latest investment portfolio from my wealth management team. At 30, I had built more success than even my ambitious 18-year-old self could have imagined. My software security company, Mercer Shield, had gone from a dorm room startup to a multinational corporation with government contracts and Fortune 500 clients. The coding skills that had earned me the Turing Scholarship had evolved into innovations that transformed cybersecurity protocols worldwide. My executive assistant knocked lightly before entering. "Mr. Mercer, your 2 p.m. appointment has arrived." "Thank you, Sarah. Give me 2 minutes, then send them in." As she closed the door, I took a deep breath, centering myself for the meeting ahead. This wasn't a typical client consultation or investor pitch. This was family business. The culmination of agreements made 12 years earlier when I was still a teenager negotiating the terms of my future. The door opened, and my parents entered. My father's hair now completely silver, my mother's face lined with the passage of time. They looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than the authority figures who had once controlled every aspect of my life. "Tyler," my mother greeted me, her smile tentative but warm. "Mom? Dad?" I rose, gesturing to the comfortable chairs across from my desk. "Please, sit down." They settled in, glancing around at the modern office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist design. Awards and recognitions lined one wall. Industry honors, patents, magazine covers featuring my company and innovations. Evidence of a success they had never anticipated when they diverted my college fund to my sister's failed ventures. "Quite a view," my father commented, nodding toward the window. "It helps with perspective," I replied, seeing the bigger picture. My assistant returned with a tray of coffee and water, then discreetly withdrew. I waited until we were alone before retrieving a leather portfolio from my desk drawer, the same one my grandfather had used 12 years ago when he helped me confront my parents about the misappropriated 529 funds. "Today marks a significant milestone," I began, opening the portfolio. "The final payment on your mortgage comes due today, as does the last installment of the repayment plan for my college fund." My mother nodded, emotion flickering across her face. 12 years. It's hard to believe it's been so long. "And yet, in some ways, it feels like yesterday," I said, removing several documents from the portfolio. "I've prepared everything for the final transactions. Once completed, the house will be fully yours again, free and clear of all liens and obligations. Tyler, my father leaned forward, his expression earnest. Before we proceed, your mother and I want to say something. I waited, giving them space to speak. These past 12 years, watching you grow from that determined teenager into the man you are today, it's been extraordinary, he continued. The arrangement you proposed back then, becoming our mortgage lender when you turned 25. At the time, it felt like punishment, like our son was becoming our creditor. That was never my intention, I reminded him gently. We know that now, my mother interjected. What seemed like harsh terms to us then proved to be exactly what everyone needed. The structure, the accountability, it changed everything, not just financially, but in how we function as a family. She wasn't exaggerating. The aftermath of our agreement had transformed our family dynamics in ways none of us could have fully anticipated that day in our dining room. The first year had been challenging, my parents adjusting to the new financial reality, Olivia learning to support herself without family bailouts, me navigating Princeton with a complex mix of scholarships, grants, and part-time work. But gradually, something remarkable had emerged from the ashes of our old family system. My parents, freed from the constant drain of supporting Olivia's failed ventures, had rebuilt their financial stability. My father had revitalized his architectural practice, focusing on sustainable design projects that brought both economic reward and professional fulfillment. My mother had returned to teaching, eventually becoming department chair at the local community college. Olivia, perhaps most surprisingly, had flourished under the new paradigm of accountability. Forced to stand on her own, she had discovered genuine talents that had been obscured by years of enabling. Starting as a sales clerk at a boutique similar to the one she had tried to launch, she had worked her way up to regional manager for a national retail chain. The business acumen she had always claimed but never demonstrated finally emerged when failure became a real possibility rather than a temporary setback cushioned by family resources. As for me, Princeton had been transformative. The Next-Gen Technologies internship arranged by Dr. Turing had evolved into ongoing mentorship and eventually seed funding for Mercer Shield. My grandfather had lived long enough to see the early success of my company before passing away 3 years ago, leaving me both his wisdom and a legacy that strengthened my foundation. The mortgage arrangement was never about punishment, I explained. It was about establishing clear boundaries and accountability, about ensuring that promises made were promises kept. And they were, my father acknowledged. Every payment, on time, for 12 years. Even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult, my mother added. That's when it mattered most to show you that we understood the seriousness of our commitment. I nodded, appreciating their recognition of this fundamental truth. Which brings us to today. I slid the final documents across my desk, the mortgage satisfaction paperwork, the acknowledgement of full repayment of the 529 funds with interest, the release of all claims and liens. Once you sign these, everything is settled. The house will be yours free and clear, and the 529 obligation will be considered fully satisfied. They exchanged glances, a wordless communication that reminded me of their silent exchanges during my childhood. Only now, I was no longer excluded from understanding their meaning. Actually, my father said, we've been discussing an alternative. Arrangement. What kind of alternative? I asked, curious. My mother reached into her purse and removed an envelope, sliding it across to me. We'd like you to read this first. Inside was a handwritten letter, my father's precise architectural script filling 2 pages. Dear Tyler, as we approach the final payment on both the mortgage and the 529 repayment plan, your mother and I have been reflecting on the journey these past 12 years. What began as a difficult reckoning with our failures as parents has evolved into something we never could have anticipated, a transformed family built on mutual respect rather than obligation. The structure you created at 18, which seemed so formal and transactional to us then, provided the framework for real healing and growth. You were right when you said our family had operated on implicit terms that served none of us well. The explicit terms you established instead became the foundation for something healthier and more sustainable. We've watched with immense pride as you've built your company and your life on your own terms. You never needed our financial support. You proved that beyond any doubt. What you needed was our respect for your boundaries and your future, which we failed to provide until forced to confront our own misguided priorities. The house that has been under your lien these past years is now worth considerably more than when we signed our agreement. Rather than simply completing the final payments and reclaiming full ownership, we propose something different, something that acknowledges the true nature of family legacy. We would like to gift you half ownership of the house, converting it to a rental property that can provide ongoing income. We would manage it on your behalf as we transition to the smaller condo we've purchased for our retirement. This arrangement would allow us to continue contributing positively to your future while maintaining our independence and dignity. This is not offered from guilt or obligation, but from genuine recognition that you deserve this share in the family, assets that were once prioritized for your sister alone. It represents our commitment to equality and fairness, principles you taught us through your courageous stand years ago. With deepest respect and love, Dad and Mom, I looked up from the letter momentarily at a loss for words. Of all the potential outcomes I had anticipated for this meeting, this wasn't among them. I don't know what to say, I admitted. This is unexpected. Just as your proposal was unexpected 12 years ago, my father pointed out with a gentle smile. Sometimes the most meaningful changes come from directions we never anticipated. Have you really thought this through? I asked. The house has been your home for over 30 years. And it will continue to serve our family, just in a different capacity, my mother replied. We've already purchased the condo, something smaller, easier to maintain as we age. The reality is, the house is too large for just the 2 of us now. What does Olivia think about this? The question emerged unbidden, an old reflex from a time when her approval or disapproval shaped family decisions. My parents exchanged amused glances. She said we should have done it years ago, my father admitted. That it's about time we recognize the imbalance in how we distributed family resources and took concrete steps to address it. This, perhaps more than anything, illustrated how profoundly our family dynamics had changed. The Olivia of 12 years ago would have viewed such a proposal as a threat, a diminishment of her privileged position. The Olivia who had learned to stand on her own recognized the justice in it. I don't need the property, I said carefully. Financially, I'm more than secure. We know, my mother nodded. That's what makes this different from the original college fund situation. This isn't about need. It's about equity, about acknowledging through action rather than just words that you deserved better than what we provided. I considered their proposal, turning it over in my mind. There was elegance to it, a symmetry that brought our 12-year journey full circle. What had begun with their improper use of funds designated for my future would conclude with their voluntary gifting of assets to secure that same future, long after I had proven I could secure it myself. I appreciate the thought behind this, I said finally. But I would like to propose a third option. I reached into my desk drawer and removed a folder containing documents I had prepared as a contingency. Not this exact scenario, but something adjacent to it. I anticipated that today might present an opportunity for a reset, though not quite in this form, I explained. What if, instead of transferring half ownership to me, we established a family education trust? I opened the folder, revealing the framework for a new financial arrangement. The house could be sold or retained as a rental property, with the proceeds or income directed to a trust designated specifically for educational expenses, for Olivia's children, for any children I might have in the future, for deserving students who lack the resources to pursue higher education. We could name it after Grandpa, honoring his role in establishing the original 529 plan and in helping us navigate the crisis 12 years ago. My parents' expressions shifted from surprise to consideration. A legacy that extends beyond our immediate family, my father mused, beyond the mistakes and corrections of our past. Exactly, I confirmed. It transforms what began as a family crisis into a multi-generational resource. It acknowledges the importance of educational funding, the very issue that catalyzed our conflict, and ensures that future generations won't face the same challenges. I like it, my mother said, her eyes brightening. It honors the journey we've been on without dwelling in the past. It looks forward rather than back. And it completes the transformation of our family finances from imbalanced and secretive to purposeful and transparent, my father added. The Thomas Mercer Educational Trust. He tested the name, nodding appreciatively. We would all serve as trustees, I continued. Equal voices, equal responsibility. A family enterprise based on shared values rather than unequal power dynamics. As we discussed the details, I felt a sense of completion. Not just of the financial obligations established 12 years ago, but of the emotional journey we had undertaken. What had begun as a painful confrontation about broken promises and misplaced priorities had evolved into a collaborative vision for the future. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. How's the final payment meeting going? Did they surprise you with their proposal? I smiled, realizing she had been in on their plan all along. Counter proposed an educational trust named after Grandpa. They're on board. Family dinner tonight to celebrate? Her response came immediately. Perfect. My place at 7. I'm cooking. No financial assistance required. The gentle self-deprecation reflected how far she had come, able to acknowledge her past dependency with humor rather than defensiveness. We're on for dinner at Olivia's tonight, I informed my parents. Apparently, she was aware of your proposal. We've all learned the importance of transparency, my father acknowledged. No more life-altering decisions made without everyone's knowledge. As we finalized the framework for the trust, I reflected on the parallel journeys we had all undertaken since that pivotal confrontation in our dining room. My parents had evolved from well-intentioned but harmful enablers to thoughtful stewards of family resources. Olivia had transformed from entitled dependency to genuine self-sufficiency. And I had grown from a justifiably angry teenager demanding fairness to a man creating systems that promoted equity beyond my own interests. There's something else we should discuss, my mother said as we concluded the trust arrangements. Something more personal. I waited, giving her space to continue. These past 12 years, as we've rebuilt our relationship on healthier terms, I've often wondered if you've truly forgiven us, she admitted. You've been cordial, supportive in appropriate ways, successful beyond our wildest hopes. But sometimes I still see a reserve in you, a careful distance that reminds me of that day you confronted us with your grandfather. The observation was perceptive, evidence of how much more attentive she had become to emotional nuances she once overlooked. Forgiveness isn't a single decision, I replied after considering her words. It's a process that unfolds over time, shaped by actions as much as intentions. And our actions? My father asked softly. Have they demonstrated the change you needed to see? Yes, I said without hesitation. Every payment, every respected boundary, every effort to treat Olivia and me with equal consideration. They've all contributed to rebuilding what was broken. The reserve you sense isn't withheld forgiveness. It's the natural caution that develops when trust has been damaged and carefully reconstructed. That makes sense, my mother nodded. Trust is earned back in increments, not all at once. Exactly, I confirmed. And today, this proposal for the trust, the completion of our financial obligations, represents another significant increment. Not the end point of our journey, but an important milestone. My father reached across the desk, his hand extended in a gesture that went beyond the professional setting. Thank you, Tyler, not just for the trust proposal or for seeing our repayment through to completion. Thank you for having the courage at 18 to demand better from us, to hold us accountable when it would have been easier to simply withdraw or comply. I took his hand, the handshake evolving into something warmer. I had good examples of standing on principle, Grandpa chief among them. He would be enormously proud of you, my mother said, emotion evident in her voice. Not just for your professional success, but for how you've handled everything. With dignity, with fairness, with an eye toward solutions rather than recriminations. As they gathered their things to leave, my father paused, a question in his expression. Looking back from where you stand now, successful beyond what any of us imagined, financially secure through your own efforts, do you ever wonder what might have been different if we hadn't taken your college fund? If you hadn't been forced to fight for what was rightfully yours? It was a profound question, one I had contemplated during quiet moments throughout my journey from angry teenager to successful entrepreneur. I believe I would have succeeded regardless of how my education was funded, I said thoughtfully. But the experience of standing up for myself, of negotiating terms rather than accepting whatever was offered, that shaped how I approach every business deal, every relationship, every challenge. It taught me that advocating for oneself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That clear terms serve everyone better than vague assurances. I gestured to the view beyond my window, the financial district where Mercer Shield's headquarters now stood as a testament to innovation and strategic thinking. Would I have preferred a simpler path to Princeton? Of course. But would I have developed the same clarity about boundaries, the same insistence on transparent terms, the same confidence in my right to fair treatment? Probably not. Those qualities emerged from adversity, from the necessity of charting my own course when the one promised to me was suddenly unavailable. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I've never thought of it that way, that our failure might have contributed to your strength. That would be too convenient a narrative, I clarified gently. My strength developed despite your failure, not because of it. But the experience did force me to articulate my worth in ways I might never have needed to otherwise. And that articulation, that clear-eyed self-advocacy, has served me extraordinarily well. As I walked them to the elevator, our conversation shifted to logistics for the evening's dinner, the natural rhythm of family planning replacing the weightier topics of our meeting. This, too, represented growth, the ability to move between significant negotiations and casual interactions without lingering tension or unaddressed grievances. "We'll bring the documents for the trust to begin drafting formally," my father said as the elevator arrived. "And a bottle of that Cabernet you like," my mother added. "This deserves a proper celebration." After they departed, I returned to my office and walked to the window, gazing out at the city below. 12 years ago, standing in my bedroom after proposing the mortgage arrangement to my stunned parents, I could never have envisioned this moment. Not just the professional success, but the transformed family dynamics that made today's meeting possible. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Dr. Turing, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, still serving on my company's advisory board, still offering the blend of technical insight and life wisdom that had shaped my path since our first meeting. "Tyler?" His familiar voice crackled through the speaker. "I trust the meeting with your parents went well?" "Better than expected," I confirmed. "We're establishing an educational trust named after my grandfather. A fitting conclusion to a journey that began with a disputed college fund." "Elegant symmetry," he approved. "The hallmark of good design, whether in algorithms or in life resolutions." "I learned from the best," I acknowledged. "Your mentorship changed everything for me." "Nonsense," he dismissed gruffly, but I could hear the pleased undertone beneath his gruff exterior. "I merely recognized potential and provided opportunity. You did the difficult work of transformation, both personal and technological." After we concluded our call, I opened my laptop to review the quarterly charity reports. Among Mercer Shield's philanthropic initiatives, the one dearest to my heart was the Capability Scholarship, a fund specifically designed for students who demonstrated exceptional academic potential alongside financial need. Unlike most scholarships, it covered not just tuition, but all living expenses, books, housing, even professional clothing for interviews and internships. I had established it 5 years ago, structuring it to address precisely the gaps I had faced when my college fund was diverted. Each recipient received not just financial support, but mentorship, networking opportunities, and internship placements. The goal was to ensure that promising students could focus entirely on developing their talents, rather than working multiple jobs or accumulating crippling debt. The latest report showed 15 current capability scholars across various universities, their achievements and challenges documented in personalized profiles. Reading through their stories, I recognized echoes of my own journey. The determination to succeed despite obstacles, the refusal to allow circumstances to dictate outcomes, the strategic thinking required to navigate systems not designed with their needs in mind. But unlike my experience, these students had a safety net I had been forced to construct for myself, a foundation of support established specifically to nurture potential rather than exploit capability as a reason for reduced assistance. Sarah knocked lightly before entering. "Mr. Mercer, your 3:30 with the development team is ready whenever you are." "Thank you," I nodded. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." After she left, I closed the charity report and stood, straightening, my tie in the reflection of the window. The journey from that determined 18-year-old confronting his parents in a suburban dining room to the 30-year-old CEO preparing to guide his company's next innovation, had been remarkable in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Becoming my parents' mortgage lender at 25 hadn't been about revenge or power. It had been about establishing a framework where promises meant something, where accountability wasn't just a concept, but a lived reality. The fact that this framework had ultimately benefited everyone involved, transforming our family dynamics from exploitation masked as love to genuine mutual respect, was perhaps the most valuable return on that investment. As I headed to my meeting, I reflected on the educational trust we would establish tonight, a new framework extending beyond our immediate family, beyond the wounds and reconciliations of our past, into a future where other young people might pursue their potential without the obstacles I had faced. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Nothing involving human relationships ever is. But it was a meaningful one, transforming what had begun as a painful betrayal into a legacy of opportunity that would outlive all of us. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to having your resources diverted isn't bitter resentment or passive acceptance, but the strategic creation of new resources, new systems, new possibilities that render the original harm insignificant in comparison to what emerges from your response to it. My grandfather had understood this when he helped me craft my original proposal 12 years ago. The goal isn't punishment, he had reminded me. It's correction, establishing a new path that acknowledges what happened while creating better outcomes for everyone involved. As the elevator descended toward the conference room where my development team waited, I silently thanked him for that wisdom, for showing me that true strength isn't found in forcing others to bend to your will, but in creating structures where everyone can stand tall, including those who once diminished your value. That evening, seated around Olivia's dining table with my parents, I raised a glass to propose a toast. To the Thomas Mercer Educational Trust, I began, and to the journey that brought us here. From broken promises to new possibilities, from inequality to opportunity, from exploitation to mutual respect. To transformation, my father added, raising his glass. To boundaries that build rather than barriers that divide, my mother continued. Olivia completed the circle, her glass joining ours. And to the brother who taught me that true success comes not from endless rescue, but from finding your own strength, even when that lesson came in forms I didn't want to accept. As our glasses clinked together, I felt the completion of a circle that had begun 12 years earlier with a college acceptance letter and tears of frustration rather than joy. The wound of that betrayal hadn't disappeared. Such fundamental breaks in trust never vanish entirely, but it had been transformed into something constructive, something forward-looking, something that honored the pain while refusing to remain defined by it. My parents were no longer the authority figures who could dispose of my future on a whim. Olivia was no longer the entitled sister whose needs automatically trumped my own. And I was no longer the overlooked son whose capability was used against him, whose success became justification for exploitation. We had all become something more complex, more nuanced, more honest. A family rebuilt on clearer terms, on explicit rather than implicit expectations, on mutual respect rather than assumed hierarchy. As we moved from toast to dinner, conversation flowing easily between business updates and personal news, I recognized the final truth of our journey, that sometimes becoming someone's creditor, literally holding the lien on their home, can be an act not of vengeance but of necessary restructuring. That financial terms can provide the framework for emotional healing. That clear boundaries, firmly maintained, can ultimately create deeper connections than endless accommodation ever could. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' decision to give my college fund to my sister had set in motion the very changes that would eventually lead me to become successful enough to hold their mortgage. But beyond that surface irony lay a deeper truth: that our greatest growth often emerges from our most painful challenges, not because the pain itself is valuable, but because our response to it can create pathways we would never otherwise have discovered. As I looked around the table at the family we had become, imperfect but honest, connected but independent, supportive but respectful of boundaries, I silently acknowledged that this, perhaps, was the most meaningful return on my original investment. Not the financial success, not the professional achievements, but the transformation of broken trust into something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more valuable than blind faith had ever been. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.